Welcome back to Small Caps. My name's Kerry Stevenson. Today, I'm bringing you someone who has been flying under the radar for a little while, but not anymore. Caedmon Marriott. He's the managing director of Aldoro Resources. I say they've been flying under the radar, but this week they've made an announcement. That's why I've asked Caedmon to come on board and talk to us about what's going on with Aldoro. You guys have got some exciting news that you've released to the market this week. Before we get into that, let's just give our listeners, because as I say, you've been flying under the radar. Who are Aldoro Resources?
Well, Aldoro is still a relatively new company, listed at the end of 2018. At the end of 2019, it did an acquisition of a company called Aldoro Metals, which was a private company that myself and Rod Grievous had been preparing for IPO. That acquisition brought a number of projects to Aldoro, two of which we've been focused on this year. One is the Penny South project next to Spectrum Metals' Penny North discovery. And we've been quite focused on that in the first half, and work is continuing there. But the recent announcement that obviously you've just mentioned is we've finally got the wraps off our Narndee project, which is a very interesting nickel-copper-PGE type startup project.
Well, that's the one that's got some excitement around it. But before we go into that, because I'm just curious, where does the name Aldoro Resources come from? Because I love finding out about where who came up with the name Aldoro.
Yes, well, what I've been told, obviously I wasn't around when the company it was formed or IPO'd, but yeah, apparently two of the founding shareholders, one was called Aldo and the other was called Rob. So together it's Aldoro. Yeah.
There I was thinking it was some romantic name, but it's the founding.
Yes, it almost has something of Portuguese origin or something like that. But no, it's Aldo. Yeah.
Aldo and Rob. Okay, so Aldoro. ASX code is ARN for those listening. Let's talk about this latest announcement this week with the Narndee project. You've had this for a little while. Tell us about what's happening and why you think that this is potentially a company maker.
Yeah, so we've been working up the Narndee project for a number of months this year. The big announcement is that we're finally getting going with some serious exploration there. We have a V10 Max airborne EM survey commencing in November. This is a survey we've had it booked for a number of months, but we're just waiting for the system to become available, and so that'll be arriving on site in November and commencing the survey. Why do we think it's exciting? Well, because it's Narndee, part of the Narndee Windermurra complex is a very large, I think I'm confident in saying it's the largest layered mafic, ultramafic intrusion in Australia. And this type of geology has been having very much a renaissance this year. You've seen a number of discoveries for nickel, copper, magmatic sulfides in this type of geology. Obviously, the topical one is Julimar that everybody knows. Australia's recent carboid discovery is another one in this type of geology. Everyone's very familiar with komatiite type nickel, but the layered mafic intrusions is a second type that is less well known maybe in WA, but certainly a lot of very topical discoveries this year.
And why is it important? Why is that different style? I mean, for me as a sort of, I'm not a geologist, explain to us why all of a sudden, because I know the Julimar, that's Chalice Gold Mines, that's got a lot of attention. Why is this suddenly coming to the fore, and what makes it a little bit different and therefore interesting to invest in?
Well, it's the right style of geology to host nickel-copper-PGE. So you're looking for these large layered intrusions where you're getting intrusions of magma into magma chambers. You're getting the right chemical conditions that create these sulfide droplets, and these droplets settle out to form these massive sulfide deposits. Now, some of these names that we've mentioned, it was interesting. I was reading a PhD thesis on Narndee recently, and in the introduction, a number of this type of geology has been known since the 80s. Julimar was mentioned in the introduction. Carboid also mentioned as a type of this geology similar to Narndee. But it's only when you now go back and you revisit these with new modern techniques, high-powered EM that just wasn't, they didn't have that technology back in the 80s to look for this sort of style. And so yeah, you go back and revisit some of these. And in a sense, for this year, Narndee is almost the last cab off the rank. You know, people have made fantastic discoveries at, you know, recently at Julimar, at Carboyd, and now we're going to get going at Narndee.
You say this is the last one, or you feel like this is the last one. Let's talk about location, and let's talk about size, and let's talk about some of the things that you're going to be doing in this this VTEM max survey that you've got starting in November.
Yeah, so if you take the Narndee Windamurra as one sort of giant intrusion, it's something like 2,500 square kilometers, which puts it well up. I mean, even I think globally, I think I'd put it in the top 10 of intrusions of this scale. And so what you get in this is it's large mantle plumes over, you know, millions of years and settling out of a stratigraphy of rocks. And of course, you need two things really. You need one. You need the chemistry of the magma and the intrusion, and we know we have two very good factors there. We know that the magma that was intruding into here had a very high nickel content, and the most important thing is this magma needs to reach what's called sulfur saturation, so that sulfides, nickel, copper, things like chalcopyrite, pentallite, and as listed for Narndee, numerous other nickel sulfide minerals, many of which I hadn't heard of. Are all precipitating out and then are settling down and forming these deposits. And the second aspect you're looking for is the focusing, and it's very much the physics. And the analogy here that's used historically, because of its size and its scale and its similarities, therefore, to the Bushveld complex in South Africa, which is a huge example of a layered mafic intrusion. There, the Merensky Reef is a 1 to 2 meter thick bed of a very high PGE content over tens, if not hundreds of kilometers, very laterally continuous stratiform type deposit. So people have gone to look at Narndee with that analogy, and maybe that's not the right analogy, because in terms of the physics, you're looking for focusing. If you look for nickel copper, it's very much, rather than if the magma chamber is the bathtub where this settling out's happening, what we're actually looking for, if you look at, for examples like a Nova, that's now obviously IGO, or things like Voisey's Bay, you're actually looking for the plumbing of this system. It's the conduits. It's, if you like, if the magma chamber is the bathtub, we're looking for the tap, and we're looking even for the U-bend within that tap where the magma is pulsed through, heavily saturated with sulfides, and then they've precipitated out in this U-bend. So it's a much smaller, discrete target of very condensed massive sulfides. And so that's the kind of the thinking and the technique that we'll be applying at Narndee.
Given that it's quite a large area that you have, is that correct? Because I guess my question would be, you're flying this VTEM max survey. What's the size of this? How long will it take? What are you looking, you know, when do you think, and how do you know where to look? You know, that's, as I said, I'm not a geologist, but as an investor, I'm like, how do you know where to look on such a big area?
Yeah, brilliant. Well, at the end of the day, it's some luck in where you look. But no, obviously we don't own tenements over the entire complex.
Yeah.
We own just it's about 306 square kilometers, which is still a pretty large area. The portion that we have through this stratigraphy, it's very layered, and obviously you move up at the bottom, it's more predominantly ultramafic, and then you move various zones of gabbros and mafic, and then increasingly it moves up through to the top. And this entire wedge of rocks there is something like, off the top of my head, I'm going to say 16 to 20 kilometers thick. Portion that we own, and it's very strategically picked, if you like, is that basal layer, the basal part of the complex, the very heavily, predominantly ultramafic portion is a bit that we've picked of the complex, and that's where you expect to see these processes happening, the settling down to the base, of course, through gravity, and then it's quite chaotic there. It's much less layered than other parts of the complex, which is good for us. We're looking for these little intrusions, these conduits, you know, punching up through this, through these layers. And so, yeah, we think we own the right bit of it. And so from within that, yeah, we're going to do a survey over something like, I think it's 105, 110 square kilometer survey, at 150 meter line spacing. And it's being flown by helicopters, so it'll take, maybe it takes 2 weeks, something like that.
Okay. And for location-wise, where are you? I mean, we know the Julimar deposit, that's actually pretty close to Perth and quite crazy next to a highway. Whereabouts are you
Exactly.
located?
Well, we drive past that up the Great Northern. So that's, yeah, as you say, 80 kilometers out of Perth. We continue another 320, 350 kilometers up the Great Northern. And then we are just 30 kilometers off the Great Northern as well, but just up past Paynes Find, just south of Mount Magnet.
And is it the same?
A bit of a longer drive. But
is it the same sort of geography? Is it the same sort of structure, do you think, as Julimar? Is it just an extension of that, or is it completely different?
Oh, it's completely different. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. These intrusions, they're discrete. They're bodies where a plume, where magma's been intruding up, but yeah, they're very separate areas.
Caedmon, you've spent a lot of time in the resources sector, but not just out there looking at projects. You've also been on the financial side as well. You've been out in Australia since 2008, and when we spoke off camera, you were actually pretty excited about what this is and that this is something you haven't seen before. Is this a project that you're looking at and saying, you know, this is an absolute game changer from your career point of view?
Oh yes, absolutely. I think, as I mentioned, you know, then Altilium as a collection of assets that we've entered into Aldoro. This Narndee project, that was always the core, it was the beating heart of that Altilium collection that came into Aldoro, and it's been very much under wraps. Yeah, I think for a small company like Aldoro to be able to claim to have the basal ultramafic portion of the largest of this type of geology in the whole of Australia and potentially the top 10 in the world, I think that's incredible for a small company like us, you know. And it's been underexplored for nickel copper. There's good evidence that you've got all the right magma chemistry happening. There's sulfides everywhere. We just have to apply this thinking of looking for these conduits of where it's settling out and where these focusing processes are happening. And yeah, absolutely. To go and look at something like this on this scale for a small company like Aldoro, it's incredible. Yeah, super excited.
Super excited. I do have a question for you. You listed in September 2018. We're now 2 years later. What have you been doing over those 2 years? Were you just waiting for a project like this, or tell me what's going on?
I mean, Aldoro listed with a good collection of assets, of predominantly nickel-focused assets. We also have a very large position literally surrounding St George at their Mount Alexander project. If you've followed that, again, they've been very successful there in nickel copper massive sulfides, and so we own. We surround them and have the potential extension of that cathedral's belt. So we've done some work there. Other deposits, again, up at Leinster, we drilled in late 2019 at some nickel sulfide targets there too. And then vending in Altilium, the main focus at the time, it was very topical, was the Penny South project that Altilium owned, right and contiguous with Spectrum. Now Ramelius is Penny West deposit, and that work's ongoing. We hit that very hard in the first half of this year. We've made some pretty significant intersections of gold, probably the best set of results ever drilled on that tenement. We've identified a mineralized structure over 400 meters with grades. They're not Penny North degrades, which obviously it may come as some disappointment to people, but other grades around the Penny North area, Magenta, Columbia, just up the road from Penny North, very similar intersections to that. And there's something to say that maybe if you're following a strict Penny West model, we've just intersected the lower grade hanging wall. It has a lower grade sort of mafic schist hosted component to that Penny West deposit that's similar to what we've found a few meters at 3 to 6 grams a ton. But the bulk of the deposit is hosted actually within the granodiorite. And so that's something else that's ongoing there. We're going to drill a deeper hole to test that granodiorite. So yeah, that's another option in the bag, another game changer for the company.
Are you going to keep working on that project while you focus as well on Narndee?
Yeah, very much so. I think I don't know when this video will go out, but we'll be releasing our quarterly today. We've got about $2.7 million in the cash in the bank. We've got a big budget assigned for Narndee. Obviously, we're going to hit that very hard, but yes, we'll have ongoing gold exploration as well. We're very conscious of being exposed to both nickel and to gold. So continuing work at Penny South, we've got air core results coming up from Youanmi, which is another gold target within this Youanmi shear zone, obviously a very active area with the likes of Rox and Venus and Ramelius. So 2 gold projects there, and then we're waiting on some grants of some tenements at Ryan's Find, just north of Southern Cross. And if you follow Oramin, are recently completing an IPO there, very successfully raised $7 million for their Mount Dimer project, and 27 Co made an acquisition of the Taipan mine just near us. And so, yeah, we expect grant of the tenements maybe February next year. And so that'll be another major gold project that you'll see a focus of in 2021 as well. So
a couple of major gold projects. Let's go back to Narndee, because I'm actually quite interested in Narndee. What's going to be the news? You've got this survey. You say it's going to take a couple of weeks. Yep. Talk me through going into 2021, because it's scary, Caedmon, but we're nearly at the end of 2020. Thank goodness in one way.
Yes, yeah, we certainly are. Exactly. These things, it's gone by very quickly this year. So EM survey, and then we'll be getting on the ground to ground truth a number of these targets. It's going to be a very methodical approach. We're not just going to forget EM hotspots and just go and wildcat drilling immediately. So ground geophysics with gravity surveys, potentially moving loop EM surveys, and some infield geochemistry. Falconbridge did some great work in the early 2000s, and there's great geochemical coverage with huge soil anomalies of nickel, but we'll infill those as well, just to get an understanding of the structure of these targets. And then we've got a big drilling allocated for budget sometime, hopefully in the first half of next year.
So you basically flew under the radar until, excuse the pun here, Caedmon, but you flew under the radar until you could get these helicopters out to get this survey done, and now you can see a lot of news flow coming from the Narndee project.
Absolutely, yeah, it's all kicking off. That's the point of the announcement that we made. Surveys locked in, off we go with that. That's going to be the first item to just start generating these priority targets, and then we'll be on the ground, ground truthing those targets, and then looking to drill those early in 2021.
Caedmon, we've got a lot of people watching this at the moment on the Small Caps website and podcast. Tell me why you think that this is a great time for investors to sit up and take notice of somebody who's been flying a little bit under the radar so far.
I think it goes back to some of the things we said. I think I consider Aldoro, we're just a small company, and for us to have a project of this scale and this prospectivity, it's historically, it's demonstrated it has all the right chemistry, and it's had a working sulfide system over a large area. No one's applied these modern techniques and thinking, and so yeah, a little small company like us to be able to claim to have this portion of the largest of something in Australia. Yeah, we're gonna hopefully have a very exciting 2021.
I think it sounds like you're suddenly starting to take off like the 747 down the runway. Oh no, there are no planes flying, are there? Caedmon, very, very good to speak to you today. Any final comments for our listeners?
No, well, just stay tuned. Yes, there's going to be a lot of news flow on a lot of front. We've obviously got nickel exposure. We'll continue the gold exposure. And yes, there's multiple projects we're working on. Obviously, Narndee's the focus, but look out for some of our gold exploration as well.
Well, do you know what? We love being the people that let others know that this is an opportunity, and technology is what's been able to get this project to a place where you can get quite excited about it. So Caedmon Marriott from Aldoro Resources, thanks so much for joining Small Caps today.
Cool. Thank you very much for having me.